So I'll start now. Hi everyone, just wanted to say thank you for joining, and if you could post in the Q&A or in the chat that you can see the slides and just hear me clearly. We've also got Richard on the call who will be presenting. If you could say hi, Richard, just so everyone can hear you.
Hello everybody.
Just comment down below if you can hear us okay, and that you can see the slides okay, just so we can make sure we get everything right first time. Thank you. Or you can like the comment I just put in there. Lovely. Cool. Yeah, people can hear us. So Richard, feel free to take it away.
Excellent. Thanks, Freya. So hello everybody. My name's Richard Kleiser, and this session is on Microsoft 365 collaboration. So just a little bit about myself. I'm a consultant in the productivity practice at Visual, and I've been at Visual for about 2.5 years, but been a consultant in Microsoft technologies for about 15 years. And my role is to help organizations transition to and then make the most of their Microsoft 365 and Azure services. This session will be recorded and will be available for you to view and share after the event. So the agenda, we'll look at what is collaboration. We'll then look at how Microsoft are providing services to help with collaboration. Then we'll dive into the collaboration features of Microsoft 365. We'll then briefly look at the tools to measure collaboration, and then what next steps are. And then if you have any questions, I will answer them at the end. So if we start with what is collaboration. So collaboration is essentially the act of working together to achieve an outcome. So whether that's working together as team members, working with other parts of the organization, working with a partner or supplier, or working with your customers. Collaboration tools that you might currently use include face-to-face discussions, which have the benefit of you can discuss and make decisions quickly, but you require stakeholders to be in the same room, and there's often no recorded output. We can use paper, which has to physically be stored somewhere. Things like archive costs can be expensive, and usually, obviously, there's only one copy of a document. That's the master copy. They're difficult to edit and difficult to share, because as soon as you start photocopying and sharing multiple copies of a document, then you lose sort of your ability to keep tabs on it. And also it's reasonably insecure in that you can leave a document on the train, or it can be viewed over someone's shoulder, and things like that. So we also have file shares stored in network file shares. So your H drive or whatever drive that you might have in your organization. This allows people to store files and work on them, but there's limited metadata attached to those files. So essentially we only know the file name, who created it, when it was created, and when it was last modified. It's only accessible to one person at a time. Again, you can't access it outside the organization without some sort of technology, such as a VPN or virtual desktop. There's no version control. So again, what you end up with often is a lot of files with version 1, version 1.1, version 2, final, and things like that, which makes it very difficult for people to find the actual latest version of the document they should be working on. And file shares require the involvement of the IT department to configure and manage permissions and do things like restore deleted content, which then creates delays and obviously work for the service desk. We have email, which is really useful, but requires people to obviously be monitoring their emails. And then we have issues around emails with multiple recipients are difficult to manage. So if you're included in an email and you don't want to be included in it, it's very difficult to then unsubscribe, because then people obviously reply to different groups of people and things like that. multiple versions of the same file. So if you're sending a file out to be reviewed, for instance, then you have to send a different copy to each different person, and then they will essentially make different changes and then send them all back to you. And then you have to manually collate all those changes and update your master document, which is obviously time consuming. And then it's difficult to find and manage files stored in mailbox folders. So if you use Exchange as a filing system, as some people do, if you will then want to go and find files again, it's very difficult to do so. And obviously very difficult for other people to get hold of those files if you're off or away for any reason. There are also meeting solutions. So we have things like conference phones and conference facilities, where you can obviously have conferences with people and they can dial in and you can chat with people. We have things like WebEx and Zoom, which allow you to then chat and also share video and your screens and things like that. And then tools like Skype for Business as well, which all work well in their own way, but content is then stored within these different systems. So it's very difficult to then, again, search for content that might be stored across multiple systems. One big problem we've had this year is obviously COVID-19 has necessitated the rapid adoption of remote working. So what we would normally do is go into an organization and talk about how you can adopt Microsoft technologies, and that's quite a long drawn out process that can take up to years. But in this last year, people have had to very quickly start using remote technologies within sort of weeks or months. But that's been rolling out sort of just certain technologies, so Teams, meetings, and now people are going back and looking at how they can now roll out the rest of the Microsoft feature set. Other problems with working from home quickly is your IT infrastructure can be quickly overwhelmed. So where you have VPNs and remote desktops set up for a certain number of expected people working from home, obviously if your entire organization works from home, they very quickly get overwhelmed and then give your end users a poor user experience. Teams no longer working in the same location, so things like ad hoc face-to-face meetings and conversations are more difficult, which can affect productivity, and access to organizational content from outside the organization is difficult. So again, where you're using paper-based solutions or things like file shares, people generally aren't able to access those externally, which can obviously affect productivity as well. So what can we do to mitigate that and help you move to a more forward-facing service? We can use the Microsoft Modern Workplace technologies. So this is sort of the overarching feature set that Microsoft provides for allowing people to work sort of in new and modern ways. So we have the modern desktop, which is things like Windows 10 and all the features that come along with that. We have built-in compliance features, so things like labeling and security around that. We have security, so things like not being able to, or multi-factor authentication and things like that. And then we also have teamwork services. So let's just have a quick look at some of the features that are available. So if we have a look at modern desktop first, we have things like Windows Defender for Endpoint, which essentially is your antivirus and anti-malware solution. It provides things like central reporting and alerting, and obviously anti-malware detection and blocking on your client devices. We have things like Windows Information Protection, which allows you to block sensitive content from being copied onto USB devices or pasted into browser windows. We have Windows Hello for Business. So this is a convenient and secure authentication process. So using biometric features such as facial recognition or fingerprint reading, or things like a PIN, which just provides a more secure, more easy to use service for your end users. And then we have Windows Autopilot, which is essentially a hands-off remote deployment service. So this provides the ability to essentially buy a device from a shop, go home, sign in using your corporate account, and then that computer is then configured exactly how the organization requires it to be, which obviously means you don't have to then have lots of PCs or laptops sent back to offices to be then rebuilt by the IT team to be then resent out. So it can obviously increase productivity and the speed that people can then start working from home. On the compliance side, we have things like Windows, information protection, so things like sensitivity labels and data loss prevention. So this allows us to tag content with a specific label that we can define that allows us to say this is only for internal use only, or this is only for the HR department, or this is available to be shared externally, but only to be read but not copied or printed, etc. We have information governance, so things like retention labels and retention management. So a big problem we see is people have file shares that nothing's ever been deleted from. So they have terabytes of content that is just never deleted, which obviously makes managing it, supporting it quite difficult. It also makes it difficult for them people to find the content they're looking for. And then it also has implications around things like freedom of information and other things when you're holding content that you shouldn't be holding. Investigations and e-discovery. So this allows you to work and find information. So if you have things like freedom of information requests, GDPR, data subject requests, things like for internal audits and for legal discovery purposes, allows you to search across the whole Microsoft 365 toolset. So again, speeding up that process and making it easier. And then we have a fairly new feature, so insider risk management. And this allows you to look at your internal processes, internal people communicating, and make sure that nothing's going on that potentially cause you problems. So that includes communication compliance. So we can check emails and things like Teams conversations for profanity, threats, targeted harassment, and things like that. And also things like risky activity. So things like data theft by departing staff and security policy violations. And it uses Microsoft AI and machine learning infrastructure to perform that. Then on the security side, we have the secure score, and this allows you to see how secure your environment is and provides recommendations for how to make it more secure. And it also gives you a comparison to similar organizations to see how secure you actually are. Obviously, security is a graded thing. Obviously, if you have it completely locked down, then people aren't able to work. And if you have no security, then obviously you risk hackers getting in and other people. So you need to find that balance, and that secure score can help you do that. There's an attack simulator, so this allows you to test your people and processes with simulated attacks. So you can run phishing attacks against your senior staff and things like that to see how they respond and how your built-in policies work. And then we have alerts that you can set up that can report on unusual user and admin activity. So things like people deleting multiple files in a short space of time, and people enabling guest access to a SharePoint site, for instance. And then we have the teamwork side of things. So this is what we're going to be looking at in a bit more detail today. So we'll be looking at things like Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive for Business, Yammer, Planner, and Stream. On top of that, we have the Power Platform. So this is a suite of applications that allow you to do things like automate business processes. So Power Automate can do things from as simple as having an approval process in a document library in SharePoint to essentially writing whole applications that automate an entire business process, so like an onboarding process or something like that. We have Power Apps, which allow you to produce no-code or low-code applications that you can then publish out onto your desktop or mobile devices. We have Power BI, which is a business information dashboarding service, which allows you to take information from multiple sources and present them in easy to use dashboards that are available on devices and through the web browser. And then we have Power Virtual Agents, which are things like bots, which you can present in things like Teams or on your website that allow people to interact with an AI machine learning service and find information quickly. An overarching view of this is accessibility. So this works across things like the Microsoft 365 apps for enterprise and the things like Teams and SharePoint and things, but provides people with accessibility needs with things like a compatible screen reader experience. So if you're using SharePoint, it works really well with screen readers. There's an immersive reader built into a lot of these features, which allows you to view content in a way that works for people with visual issues. There's a read aloud function, so you can essentially have documents narrated to you, which is useful. Obviously, it can be useful if you're in a car or on a train or something and you're able to read content. And then dictation, so in Word and other products, you can now dictate content straight in just by speaking out loud. And then we have things like live captioning for Teams meetings and PowerPoint presentations, which allow you to then provide sort of live captioning for people with either hearing issues or perhaps people that can't hear due to being in an office that is too noisy, or for instance like that. They also have Teams devices. So these are things like headsets and webcams, desk phones, so a standard looking phone that then works within Teams and allows you to use your Teams voice calling functionality if you have that. And then room devices. So these are things like your standard sort of conference room, big screen, a camera and microphone systems that allow you to start, manage and use Teams for running meetings. And then they also have their Surface devices. So these are hardware devices produced by Microsoft to work in sort of multiple different scenarios. So things like Surface Pro and Surface Laptop, and Surface Book, which are sort of tablets and laptops, which allow you to sort of work in and out the office or at home or wherever. Things like the Surface Hub, which is a large screen used for presenting and collaborating in meeting rooms. And then small devices like the Surface Duo, so a dual screen mobile device, and then the Surface Go, which is a smaller, lower powered tablet than Surface Pro. So all these things can be used going forward, but what we're going to have a quick look at today is how to collaborate within Microsoft 365. So essentially, we're going to look at the teamwork section for the rest of this session. So Microsoft 365 collaboration is essentially a few building blocks that we can use to allow people to work with their content, share that with people, collaborate with other people, whether they be within your organization or outside your organization, and then view and consume information provided by other people. So if we have a look at all these things one at a time, we'll start with personal content. One thing I'm not going to cover is Teams meetings. That was covered in a session yesterday by Jamal that you can read back. But obviously, Teams has a full sort of meeting and conferencing facility like we're using now. But this is more the sort of content collaboration side of things. So starting with personal content, we have OneDrive for Business. Now, OneDrive for Business is essentially your own area within Microsoft 365 to store your content and potentially share that with people. It's a place to store content that doesn't have any other place to be at the moment. So draft documents or things like that before you'd put them in your team area. And that essentially looks like this. Sign in. So looking at it through a browser, if you've used SharePoint before, it looks very much like SharePoint, and it's based on SharePoint, but we have things like your files here. You can view your files, you can upload files, you can drag files into here. And essentially this is your own place in the cloud for storing your content. Most licenses give each end user a 1 terabyte capacity. So obviously that's quite a big space to store content. That can be managed and reduced if necessary. But this replaces people's personal drives and essentially allows them to now access this from anywhere, so in the office, at home, or on a mobile device. And we have certain features, so we can have a look at information here. So we can click on a file, and we can see if you're sharing it with anyone. We can see a preview of the content, and we can do things that we can do in SharePoint, like sort and filter very quickly based on the metadata. What we also have is the OneDrive sync client. So again, most people are used to working within File Explorer, and what we can do is use the OneDrive sync client, which sits down in your system bar, and then allows you to sync this to an area in your File Explorer, and then allows people to then continue working as they have been working while they're on their training and adoption path. You can see there's some additional, there's an additional column here with some additional icons. So by default, files are just stored within the cloud, but when you open a file, it then downloads it onto the device. This then means you can take that away to, if you're in a place that doesn't have internet access, for instance, you can then work that without having access to the internet, and then when you gain access to the internet again, that'll sync back up automatically. So that's quite useful. Another feature of the OneDrive sync client is known folder move, which is a feature that essentially takes your desktop documents and pictures and also syncs those to OneDrive. So again, you still get the same experience that your end users will be used to, but now everything's copied into OneDrive, and obviously then available anywhere. So again, if your laptop breaks and you need a new laptop, or your desktop and documents come back, if you work from a different device, then you still have access to that information. And if you're on a mobile device, again, you still have access to that information. So that's a really useful thing. What we also have is the to-do feature, which is essentially a task management feature. So people might at the moment store tasks in Outlook, which syncs up with the to-do application. So they can now again access this from a device, from work, from home, and obviously have their personal tasks available in there to be listed and tagged off as they complete them. What we also have is something called Delve, which essentially allows you to see what you and other people have been working on. But one of the key features is the ability for you to have a profile that other people can then search against. So we have things like projects, so you can see projects that you've worked on, your skills and experience. So again, if you're working in an organization and you need to find somebody with a specific skill, you can search for those. And again, just social things like what school they went to, and interests and hobbies, which can obviously be useful for finding people like that in your organization that like the same sort of things as you. So again, if I wanted to find a particular person, I can just type their name in, and we can see that there, and we can obviously go in and see some information about them there. Obviously, I can call them, I can message them straight from here, and see their information. We can see where they fit within the organization as well. I can also do things like search for a specific person's role or some work they've done before, and I can find 2 authors within my organization pretty quickly. Or if I was looking for somebody that worked on a particular project, I can then look for that project name and I can find somebody that's worked on that project. So again, finding that knowledge within your organization can be made easier using this process. We'll go back to the slides. The next thing we can look at is Microsoft 365 groups. So Microsoft 365 groups are essentially the heart of collaboration within Microsoft 365. They are essentially a permission group that apply permissions across all the features associated to that group. So we can see in the image on the right-hand side, within that group, we have all these features, and we only need to make permission changes in one place for that to be effective across all those things. Another benefit is we can delegate ownership to the content owners. So that reduces service desk calls and allows content owners to own their own content and share that with whoever they need to share it with. So if we start by having a look at Microsoft Teams, we have Teams here, and Teams from a sort of collaboration point of view provides us with this interface. So we have essentially a list of teams, and teams consist of channels. So these are different conversation areas, and each channel then contains a number of tabs across the top. The first tab is the Posts tab, which allows you to have conversations with your colleagues or whoever else is in the team. So you could have a team based on a department within your organization. It could be a project site. Potentially you could have an extranet site, so you could share content with people externally, but make it obvious that that's to be shared externally. You could also share your department and team stuff with people externally as well from within in your team, but obviously quite a lot of people don't like doing that to start with, because then they are worried that they risk sharing content that they don't want to share externally. But within our channels and tabs, we can have our conversations. We would then have access to our files. So again, where you would have had your network file shares, we have that now available in the tab. And you can see here that we have the list looks very similar to OneDrive for Business. And we can do the same sorts of things. So we can see our files here. We can then sort and filter it by different things. We can group it and do things like that. We can also view the files within Teams as well. So if I open this file up, you can see it opens within the Teams interface. And what this allows us to do is essentially work for within Teams while we do our roles, rather than jumping between applications and different websites and things. So it keeps everyone in one place. So that's quite useful. What we can have a look at now is SharePoint. So if we open this in SharePoint, we'll be able to see what that looks like. So it used to be the case that you could only do a limited number of things within Teams, and then if you wanted to do some more complicated document management, you'd have to jump into SharePoint. But the interface within Teams is now a lot better, and so you can now do quite a lot of what you'd need to jump into SharePoint for within Teams again. But what this does give us is our SharePoint site, which is associated to our Microsoft 365 group. And that gives us a place for storing documents. So we can have document libraries. So we can have multiple document libraries for different types of files we want to store. We can have everything in one document library. We can use folders. Instead of folders, we could use things like metadata. So if we want to be able to sort and filter files, then metadata is a really good way of doing that. We have pages, so these are informational pages that we can create. This is the home page for this SharePoint site, but as you can see, it's built up of various different components, and we can build these pages and provide information about either what our department does or information for our staff, kind of like a wiki, and just publish that internally to our users. We also have lists. So lists has been available in SharePoint since the beginning, but is now being promoted as sort of a new application within Microsoft 365. And what this allows us to do is essentially create either sort of database or Excel style lists, and then make them available for everyone to work on. And then we can do things like apply formatting, as you can see here, but then we can also do things like automate processes through Power Automate. So again, if you add a new item and it's over a certain amount, for instance, you could then kick off a workflow to then do something else, to either alert somebody or make a change to some content somewhere else. And that's available in there. And it's also available within the Teams interface as well. The other feature, which is really useful, is Onenote. So what Onenote is essentially a note-taking tool, which allows you to then take notes, things like minutes of meetings, and other things like that, but then make it available to the rest of your team to share. So as you can see here, we can do things like insert images, we can have text, we can add audio recordings, we can write on there, and things like that. And then essentially this allows you to then share that with everyone else in your team. So that's really useful for things like meeting minutes and things like that, because what you can also do is co-author using it. So you can maybe be in a meeting with 5 people and all have this notebook open and all add your own content, which means there's less reliance on one person to then take down all the information. So that's a really quick look at that. What we also have within our groups are a couple of features. So we have Planner, forms, and then some governance features. So let's have a quick look at that. So if we go to Planner, so Planner is a really useful sort of group task management system, which again is available on through your browser or through a mobile app, and that allows you to create these buckets of sections, and then allows you to move tasks between them, and obviously assign tasks to people and manage their progress. So this is really useful for sort of team tasks or anything like that, where people sort of work together and need to assign tasks to each other. Forms is a really useful feature. Where's that gone? There we go. So this allows you to create either quizzes or forms that can then be published to your end users or potentially externally as well. And it's really good for gathering information. So there's a couple here with things like I can ask questions and then obviously view the responses, but obviously I can add things like multiple choice questions, text columns, and things like that, and then publish that out. So I can either publish that as a form, or potentially I can publish that within a SharePoint site, or potentially in Yammer, or potentially in Teams. So for instance, in Teams, you could potentially have your team service desk, and then you could have some forms on there that people could access, or potentially on your intranet homepage, you could have a quiz, maybe a staff quiz on certain things. And that's obviously really easy to use and really useful as well. So the other thing we have is around governance. Let's just go back to SharePoint. So we have things like group expiration. So what we can do is have groups created, or allow end users to create groups and then have them time out after a certain amount of time, so potentially 12 months, after which it will email the site owners, the group owners, and if they don't need that anymore, it can then delete the teams automatically. So that prevents you ending up with essentially hundreds of teams that you don't really need anymore, and that automatically manages that for you. We have things like guest access, so we can allow external people to access our teams and our SharePoint sites and planner plans and things like that. And we can enable that at a global level, but then also define that at a team level. So we can say we can have sort of various teams that can have external access. So if you work with partners, you can allow them to work directly on the files that you're working on, rather than have to email them backwards and forwards, or as quite a lot of people have to do, then put them on a separate service to allow them to access it. We have things like sensitivity labels, as I mentioned earlier. So we can apply a sensitivity label to some content, and by doing that, then define what happens to it. So again, if I just go into Word here and create a blank document, we can see there's a sensitivity option in the ribbon, and I can decide what label to apply to this content. Now, using the labels, I can define whether people need to add a label by default, what the default label is, or just leave it as people can just add the label as they need to. With the E5 licensing and some of the compliance packs, you can also have it auto tag based on the content that you add in. So if you start adding content that has sensitive information, so things like passport or NI numbers or credit card numbers, or sensitive information types that you can define, then it will either recommend a label is added or automatically add that label for you. So if I label that as internal, I can then define what happens to that. So I can say things that have been tagged internally cannot then be shared externally. Or if they are shared externally, you can only view it, but not print it and copy and paste it, for instance. We can apply retention policies to our Teams and SharePoint sites. So I can say, even if you delete files or conversations or anything like that, it retains it in the background. So if you then need to do any e-discovery or audit work, you can then go back and see how things were at a point in time. And then we have data loss prevention policies. So we can do things like prevent Teams conversations containing sensitive information. So again, if you're trying to put passport numbers or NI numbers or any of your defined sensitive info types into a Teams conversation, that can be blocked. And again, we can stop sending content that has sensitive information outside of the organization. So that's all really useful stuff. Obviously, we can go into a huge amount more detail than all of this, but we only have sort of a limited amount of time to do this. So I'm going through it pretty quickly. Obviously, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the question box, and we'll get to that at the end. So another feature of Microsoft 365 is Intranet. So most organizations have some form of corporate internet, and they use various different systems. Some people have SharePoint, and obviously there's loads of other services available. But what we can now do with SharePoint is provide great looking websites sort of out of the box with easy to author pages. So that essentially means now your staff can now start authoring content without too much training, and then get their information and then use out to the rest of the organization. Obviously, there needs to be a filter on that. So there's an approval process that allows people to create the content and then send that off to approval to a designated person that can then approve that for publishing. So let's just have a quick look at that. So here we have our corporate intranet. And as you can see, again, it's based on the SharePoint page layout. So we have essentially lots of different web parts that we can attach to the page in different formats to provide obviously quite striking and good looking interface that would have taken quite a lot of development in the past. And this is again available over obviously through a browser, and then there's apps available on mobile devices that also provide this. Again, it's fully responsive, so if you have a smaller display, then it still will show it, but then it reorganizes the screen for you. And then we can have obviously the news created by your staff and then presented here. So let's just edit this page just to show you how easy it is to work with this. Essentially what we have is sections, and within those sections we have web parts. So we've got here a column here, and we have a timer web part, and we can go in here and do things like add a background image, add some information, obviously set the timer, and provide some links and things like that. We can have things like the Yammer surfaced in here. We can have Twitter feed surfaced in here. Then we can have links to other areas of your intranet, and then some more dynamic things like content that's been recommended to you based on what you've been looking at recently, what your colleagues have been looking at recently. We have things like sites that you've been using recently and documents you've been working on. So again, it's not a static page. It changes based on who's accessing it and things like that. But as you can see, it's very easy to make quick changes, and we can do things like modify the look of a section. So let's have a look there. So if I wanted to change the background color, I can very quickly do that. And then if I wanted to move things around, I again can just drag and drop that around to there. And so again, this is obviously how it will work for an intranet page, but this will work for your information pages within your team sites as well. So you can make those as good looking as you can imagine. So that's really good. What we also have is a concept of hub sites. So it might be that your comms team don't manage the whole intranet and you want to delegate information out to the rest of the organization. So what we can do is essentially have a hub site, which in this case is the intranet homepage, and then have some delegated sites which are linked to it. And then by that, you can then have a shared navigation. So we have 3 sites here, and they all have that same navigation. So if I go to our sales onboarding site, it still has that navigation. So again, the internal comms team or adoption team or whoever is responsible for this can manage that navigation so it stays the same no matter where you are. And obviously that makes it easier for people to navigate around. We have a shared color theme. So I can set a theme as part of the marketing or comms team, and then all these other sites will then use that same theme, which then obviously stops sites looking different to the corporate standards. And the important thing about having hub sites is you can then roll up content and display that at the top level. So again, we have these news articles here that say the landing have been created on this site, but this sales onboarding news article was created in the sales site, but is now rolled up into here. So you can then roll up information across your organization and show that within your intranet. And obviously this can be managed by your comms team as well. And they can decide what gets displayed and what doesn't get displayed. Another thing you can do is publishing documents. So because it's just a SharePoint site, you can then publish things like policies and procedures and things like that, and then show them on intranet pages and make it easy for people to find and access. And again, across most of the Office 365 or Microsoft 365 tools and the enterprise apps, there's a search bar at the top. And as you can see, just by clicking on it, comes up with some suggestions. So again, the more you use it and the more documents you work with, the more it knows about who you work with, what sort of news you like, what sort of files you've been working on. So even before you start typing, it has a good go at finding stuff you might find useful. but obviously I can then search for a file if I know what I'm looking for. Now search will crawl within the files as well. So if that content is within the file, it will also find it. So it's not just based on the file names or the metadata, so that can be really useful. And obviously I have previews of the files here to see if that's the file I was looking for. So another couple of features. So we have Power Apps, Yammer, and Stream. So as I mentioned before, Power Apps is sort of an app creation tool, and I can do things like create this sort of tool. This is just a sample application, so an interview tool that I can create, so I can add my positions that I need to recruit for, and then add the candidates, and then people within the interview can then add their comments to that. But the good thing about this is it's either available from the browser. We can use the Power Apps app on a mobile device, so potentially you could run this from an iPad or your phone within the interview, and it's also then available within Teams, and you can also publish these on Sharepoint pages. So once you've created it once, you can then surface it in lots of different places. We then also have Yammer, which is the discussion community feature. So again, if you've used an internet forum before, then this should look quite familiar. It allows you to have conversations just like you do in Teams, but in a less restrictive way. And there's lots of different features that allow you to then ask questions, add rich media, things like that, and the standard sort of GIFs and memes and things like that. So this is a good place to have less formal conversations. So company news, things like buy and sell forums, social forums and things like that. This is a really good place to do that. And again, there's a mobile app available for this, and you can surface this in Teams and also SharePoint, as we saw earlier. We also have Stream, which is essentially your corporate YouTube, which is a place where we can put files, media files, and then allow people to access them. We can group them into channels and just make it easier for people to find. And again, we can surface this within Teams and within SharePoint and on your mobile device. One of the really useful features on Stream is once you've uploaded a video, you can see it creates a transcript. So now I can have a look through here and find the content I was looking for. So rather than have to look through the whole video, again, if you looked at this presentation from within Stream, then you'll be able to see where I was talking about a particular subject you were interested in, and obviously you can search for that and find that, and then you click on it and it will take you straight to that section of the video. As you can see, we have the closed captions there as well. And so that's a really useful feature for being able to obviously go back and look at corporate information, but then very quickly see or find the information you're looking for. So let's have a very quick look at end user devices. So I've mentioned it as we've gone through, but essentially there's a Teams client, and that's available for Windows, Mac OS, Android, iOS, and also Linux. And obviously that gives you all the features for meetings and collaboration. We have the Outlook client, which is where we use our emails and calendaring features. And obviously we can use that within the clients that's included with Microsoft Apps for Enterprise, but it's also available over the web. And there's also mobile apps available for that as well. The OneDrive for Business client, so we can have a mobile app for that. So again, you can take your personal content and modify that while you're out on a train, at a hotel or wherever, or from your office or from your home location. And then Microsoft 365 apps for enterprise, which is your Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and there are client apps for that are available for Windows, Mac OS, and then the mobile devices, Android and iOS as well. And it's also available through a web browser. So having all these features allows you to work potentially from anywhere and get the same experience, and allows you to sort of collaborate with your colleagues, with people within your business, and obviously your customers and partners. So bringing all that together looks a bit like this. So essentially we can take all these different features and today pretty much surface most of it within Teams. And the key for that is to give people one application to work from, and then allow them to do everything from in there, which then means they don't have to keep switching around between different applications and things like that. What you can also do is then add your own line of business systems into that. So let's just go back to here. So let's have a look in Teams. So within Teams, we can do things like I can view my lists in here. So the lists we had in SharePoint are now available straight from within this tab, again, meaning we can stay within our conversation. We can have document libraries in there, specific ones. I can also have links to pages within SharePoint. So this is our retail homepage again. So again, if you have informational pages, so for potentially new starters or people joining your team, or just general information, then you can add that there. We have a link to the Onenote notebook that we looked at earlier. And then we have links to Planner. Now this is soon to change to tasks, because what this now does is give you your planner view, but also integrates your tasks as well. So now you can see all your tasks that you've created yourself, but all the planner tasks have been assigned to you as well. So you have essentially one list of all your tasks across the organization, and you can obviously work on those and tick them off as you go. So that's really useful. The Files tab allows you to see files within Teams, but also your OneDrive files again. So again, if you wanted to work on your OneDrive files, you can do that from here, and obviously you can create new files from within here, or upload files, or obviously sync them with your sync client. We have a link to Yammer again, so you can use your access your Yammer communities from within Teams. We have again a link to Stream, so I can see all my tagged or bookmarked videos that I might want to see. And again, essentially, I can just do all my work now from within the Teams interface, whether that's from within a browser, the app, or a mobile app. We can add apps. So there are a load of apps out there from third parties, probably hundreds of them. So you can add your various CRM tools in there. So if you're using any of these, you can then access them again straight from your Teams interface. If something you need to do is not available, then you can write your own custom apps and deploy those out to your staff as well. And essentially that's a very quick run through of the collaboration features within Microsoft 365. So once you've decided you want those and you've adopted it, how do you measure collaboration tool usage? So there's a new feature called the Microsoft Productivity Score, which is a report available from the admin console in Microsoft 365, which allows you to see how people are using your service, obviously where you need to improve your communications and training. So that's really useful. And it looks at things like communication, so who's sending emails, who's sending messages in Teams, and who's posting in Yammer. So obviously, if you see lots of people sending emails and nobody sending messages in Teams, then you need to obviously tweak your comms and understand why that's the case. You can see who's using Teams chats and channel conversations. So obviously looking at Teams adoption. We can look at meetings. So whether people are using video and screen sharing and the lengths of meetings. So obviously if people are having hours-long meetings, is that something they can look at optimizing? Content collaboration, so where people are using SharePoint and OneDrive to store content, how they're sharing files, so they're sharing links or sharing the actual files and emails. So again, something you can then target with your comms and training, and whether they're sharing content externally. The teamwork section shows how people are contributing to shared workspaces. So again, it shows people using things like the Teams channels and things like Yammer to work with their colleagues. And then we can see how many people are sending emails, who's replying to messages and emails and things like that. Obviously not on an individual basis, but as a general basis. What it also does is show you baselines from other organizations of your type. So you can see how your adoption is going compared to other organizations that are either your size or your industry. It has a mobility section, so we can see what devices people are using to access Outlook Teams and their files. So you can see if everyone's using their desktops, or maybe people have started using laptops or their mobile devices. Obviously, this depends on how you plan to roll it out. So it could be a good thing that you can check that people shouldn't be using mobile devices, or if you want them to use mobile devices, then to check the uptake. And then there's a technology section, which is really useful. So we have things like Endpoint Analytics. So you can see this links in with Intune, and you can see things like startup and sign-in times for your devices. So again, you can see if people have issues with their device that would give them a poor experience, and work on that. Network connectivity, so we can look at performance from various locations and highlight issues. And then we have the app's health, so we can see if people are on the latest version of their Office apps to make sure they're using all the latest features and security things. So if you like the sound of all that, and depending on where you are with your journey, we can help with that. So at a very high level, we have a modern workplace strategy, which looks at sort of business process side of how you currently work and how we can incorporate Microsoft 365 into that. Included in that is the transformation assessment, where we look at your preparedness for that, and obviously what services you're currently using, and how we can migrate that into Microsoft 365. At a more technical level, we can do things like review and recommendation assessments of things like Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive for Business, Exchange, identity and compliance. And then we can work with you to produce top-level documents such as your information architecture, so which services you'll use and how you'll store content across your organization. Compliance designs, so what compliance features you'll use, so the use of sensitivity labels, retention labels, data loss prevention and things like that. And then also migration approaches, so how you get your content from where it is at the moment into Microsoft 365. And so that's the end of the session. So if you have any questions, then hopefully you've put them in the questions window. So let's have a look. So there's nothing in there at the moment. So if that's that, we should probably leave it there. Obviously, if you do think of any questions or want any more information, then obviously do get in touch. We can obviously get in contact and help you out.
Cool. Thank you, everyone.